I've spent a lot of time talking about Danny Boy at different times. Because I was the officer. One of the things I did was actually debrief everybody afterwards, trying to find out exactly what had gone on. And I've spoken to local press about it, and of course I've spoken twice in court at length.
My name is Johnny Ball, and I'm the founder of CampaignForce, a not-for-profit that inspires, trains and coaches the armed forces community to stand up and serve again. I've served on the front line of military operations and in civilian life, the front line of UK politics. This Veterans in Politics podcast is a set of interviews brought to you by CampaignForce and sets out to explore how the military community can help make our politics a better place. I lean into my little black book of contacts and sit down with individuals from across the world of politics, sharing secrets, giving tips and advice, and inspiring the next generation. We are CampaignForce. This is the Veterans in Politics podcast. Let's introduce you to our guest.
We return our focus to local government and meet Councillor James Rands. James had a very active regular career and, like our host Johnny, served in the Princess of Wales's Royal Regiment. In fact, James continues his service in the reserves today. It is this desire to serve his community that comes across in this episode, which he does in his local authority. We also touch on James's involvement at the now famous Battle of Danny Boy in Iraq, and how he too was dragged through the courts facing vexatious allegations. It's time for you to meet our guest.
It's absolutely brilliant to be able to welcome another local government representative, this time from the Liberal Democrats, and our first member of the Tigers, my old regiment, James Rands. How are you, James?
I'm very good, Johnny. Good to see you. Yeah, I'm disappointed I'm the first Tiger to be on, but hopefully there'll be more in the near future.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm sure that once fellow Tigers hear your story and hear about my experience in politics too, that we can inspire other people from the infantry to stand up and serve again. But on that, obviously, I've already alluded to that you were a member of and still are a member of the Princess of Wales's Royal Regiment. Can you tell us a little bit about your military service and why you joined the army in the first place?
Well, yeah, my reasons for my first interest in the army was really childish. I was 3 years old and I watched the Iranian embassy siege, and I said to my mum, I want to do that when I grow up. And she thought, well, that won't happen. And then I was just army-barmy as a kid. I was in the cadets. I was obsessed with it. I was probably quite boring, actually. And when I went to university, I joined the Officer Training Corps, and I actually had a bit of a wobble because I thought, I didn't really enjoy this. So I quit and I joined the Honourable Artillery Company the following year and really didn't look back. So I went to Sandhurst in 2000, I think 2000, and passed out August 11th, 2001. So obviously 30 or 31 days later, or exactly 1 month later, we had 9/11. We'd all been prepping for the tail end of. We knew it was going to be the tail end of Northern Ireland, and lots of sort of Balkan deployments. And of course, it was just a completely different world. I went to the 1st Battalion, which is armoured infantry, rather than light roll, which is, if you're a bit of a fatty like me, that's quite a good thing. First tour out in Kosovo as platoon commander. That was good fun. Did the fire strike in Northern Ireland, which was surreal. Did a deployment down to Macedonia. Then I was due to go to RHQ, and we were warned off that we were going to Iraq for what would become known as Telit 4. CO called me in for an interview, asked me some very strange questions. He actually asked me, so James, I hear you're weird. Is that true? I was like, well, I've got a jacket like in the Matrix. Does that weird? He said, yeah, that's perfect. And weirdly, I got the interview on that. So I was then made the IO. The rationale is you have to be completely honest with the CO if you're going to be the IO. And I spent a lot of the rest of my career in intelligence. We did Telit 4 as the officer, did about half of Telit 6. Went to teach at Chicksands. It is weird that we never crossed.
I know.
the military. We should have done logically. And from there, I did a couple of years with the Dutch Army. Was adjutant up in Kabul of the UK Leadership Training Team, Staff College. Sorry, which way around was it? Yeah, I did a tour out with the US Marine Corps as an INT officer. Then Staff College, spent some time at the Ark, and then commanded Y Fire Support Company in the 1st Battalion, which is great. Finished off my regular career at Cast, and I left thinking I was going to leave all that behind me, and within about 6 months, I wanted back. I didn't want back in the regular army, but I wanted back in the army. I wanted back in the regiment. And so now I command B, the Royal Sussex Company down in Brighton with the reserves, 3rd Battalion. So that's the outline anyway.
Wow, I think that reads as almost like a CV many of us from our generation will identify with. All of those tours, those experiences. And as you say, it's really weird that our paths didn't cross, because I too served for a short stint with 1 PWRR just before university, and obviously now work within the military intelligence world as well, and that chick sounds connection. But you were at a period of our military history, probably the most high intense, highest kinetic and busy period that the British Army has experienced in modern times. And most famously, of course, that Iraq tour and Al Mara, and the now well-known story brought to life recently through Brian Wood MC around the Battle of Danny Boy. I mean, are you comfortable talking about that? And are you any memories from that time?
Ish. So, I mean, I've spent a lot of time talking about Danny Boy at different times. Because I was the officer, one of the things I did was actually debrief everybody afterwards, trying to find out exactly what had gone on. I've spoken to local press about it, and of course I've spoken twice in court at length. I think 7 hours cross-examination the first time, 8 hours the second time. I'm still wary about saying too much, just because any perceived contradiction was picked up over those years. It was for those who don't know, a lawyer called Phil Shiner picked up allegations of which were originally that we abducted civilians off the battlefield, tortured and murdered them, and it was bollocks, obviously. In fact, the evidence bundle that he presented had a number of different accounts of what was supposed to have happened, and one included prisoners being put up against the wall and executed by firing squad. Another one was people being stabbed and tortured to death. And you look at it and say, no one's arguing that arguing anything other than the fact that all of the prisoners were held in one place. So they can't both be true, can they? There isn't really anything here. One of the things that happened with me, I'd photographed the enemy dead after the battle, and it turned out that when I photographed them, their pictures were time stamped electronically. So those pictures became quite key evidence. Now, in the intervening time, we'd classified all of that as secret. It was all on my own personal IT, which is you'll appreciate better than most is not good, particularly if you want to have a career in intelligence. So I destroyed when the computer broke, I destroyed it, which left me pretty open. I mean, I looked extremely dodgy. There's no getting around that. However, we went over it in court twice, and then one set of judges and then another judge were quite happy that it all kind of made sense, actually, as dodgy as it looked. But I became the one of the focal points of the accusations, which was not much fun. I mean, I actually don't hold a grudge against Shiner for doing that, because I was the logical target. I mean, if I'd been on his side, I'd have done very much what he did. What I do hold a grudge against him for was going after guys that were clearly suffering from PTSD and trying to put them on the stand. I mean, in some ways, I'm quite grateful that it was me that got that focal point, because I'm just a little bit better equipped to deal with a barrister than some of the lads who maybe didn't even finish school. one thing, one of the things that happened during that whole period was that a lot of my military friends who are quite right wing, or certainly more right wing than I was, thought it was absolutely hilarious that me, as a bit of a lefty, as they saw it, was getting prosecuted by Phil Schuyler, this activist lawyer. There were a few comments about what's it like being turned on by your own, and of course, I'm a liberal, I'm not a socialist, but it's like I'm still in the military. I'm still quite a way over to the left of a lot of people. But one thing really got me during this process was that Phil Schuyler submitted something to court, which I think was actually accepted, which was the suggestion that because we were the military, we were required to prove that we hadn't done certain things, and that was just fundamentally wrong, and that really pissed me off. And it has shifted the way I look at a lot of these things. I mean, when we have conversations about people like Shamima Begum, there's the one impulse, which is, she chose where she was going. She's a terrorist. As a military man who's been fought in that region, she's just a target. Because once she's surrendered, she's not. And she has to have the same, she's a British citizen, she has to have the same legal protection as everyone else, because if we don't extend that, if we don't extend those liberal values and those freedoms, those rights to everybody, then they're worthless. If you can pick out an individual, whether it's because they're the military or whether because they have fought with ISIS, and say we're going to rob them of their rights, then there is no stopping that. That will extend to other groups who will be selected based on their popularity or otherwise. So that, in some ways, the whole process actually solidified some of my values in a way that perhaps people wouldn't have expected.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for being so generous by sharing that with us, because it must be difficult. And for those of us that have observed it, it's been difficult to see as well. But clearly you went through that process, exonerated in the courts as well, and you're continuing serving, which is an absolute delight to see as an Army Reservist officer in your regiment. It's absolutely phenomenal to see. So there's clearly something about service that runs through your veins, because not only serving your country, but now serving in your community as well as an extension of that. So what is it about service that particularly resonates with you, and what are those skills that you may have taken from military life over into political life too?
I think for military service, it's pretty good fun most of the time. There are low points, like being in the dock at, the High Courts of Justice, but most people don't have to deal with that. I like being part of a team. I think a lot of us do. There's some work done by psychologists about the military which suggests that most of us, when we join, are actually quite introverted. We want to disappear into this big group.
I was talking about this yesterday with someone. It's really weird about it being introverted, but sorry, go on.
Yeah, so the suggestion was that we like the idea of all wearing the same clothes so we don't stand out, and all sort of just blending into this team. And then the army decides that certain people amongst us actually need to lead, and you go, you're going to become an extrovert now. Which is, I don't know how true it is, but I think I do like being part of a team. I think there's no better feeling really than when you're part of a team where everyone's pulling in the same direction, where everyone's got the same common goal, and everyone is doing the very best. They're at the top of their game. And I think Telic 4 was very much that sort of a campaign. We were very lucky to pull the right combination of people together, because it's not just about having the best, it's about having people who complement each other's skill sets. So actually, if you pulled our headquarters from across the British Army of just the very best, you probably still have got Matt Mayer as the CEO, but I think the rest of us other people would have been selected. But I don't think it would necessarily have worked as well, because I think the egos would have clashed. People would have, it's completely hypothetical, but I think people would not necessarily have complemented each other in the way that we did. So to be part of that was really fantastic. And soldiers are a lot of fun to be around. Even when they're misbehaving, they're generally pretty good fun. And you get to do a lot of good, useful things. And I remember in our first tour, one of the things we did was raid what was called the Sunny Hills Massage Parlour. I assume Sunny Hills was named after the place in the bill, but this was clearly not a massage parlour. And we liberated 6 or 7, I think, women who'd been trafficked. That's pretty good. I mean, I wasn't directly involved in the raid. I think I was sat in the ops room controlling it at the time. But that's a pretty good feeling to be able to do those sorts of things. And we did prevent what could have become a massacre in Kosovo by just holding back some police who were going to get carried away. That's good. Those are things that you take to your grave. When it comes to local government, there's the really, really arrogant sounding answer, which is I think that if you've got the ability to make plans, to make decisions, to really help, you've probably got a duty to put yourself forward and put yourself into the picture. And I know that does sound arrogant. It sounds like you got something, some sort of messiah complex or something. But after 17 years regular service, you have picked up a lot of skills. You can analyse a problem in a way that is not actually that common. It's sometimes difficult when you're in the military to realise that some of the skills that you take for granted are actually quite rare. We recently had one of my residents spoke to Tunbridge Wells Borough Council about planning from a sort of military point of view, and he taught the 7 questions, and people were blown. Some people were like, "Oh yes, I remember doing this in a management course," but a lot of people were blown away. They go, "Oh, this is really good. This is really good." Thinking about what you need to achieve and then how you achieve it. And you think, this is what we teach Lance Corporals. This is not this is not complicated stuff, but actually it is quite an unusual skill set. And as you'll have done the same thing. You take conventional military skills, particularly in intelligence, things like intelligence preparation of the battlefield or battle space, and then turn it into intelligence preparation in the environment. Those sorts of skills actually do translate. I mean, they translate a little bit better to campaigning than to necessarily being an active councillor, but picking that together, and also lots of possibly soft skills like learning what to focus on, learning when to pay attention and when not to, learning how to listen to people's problems, because obviously as a platoon commander, as a company commander, you're quite often dealing with people who are if they're in your office, it's either because they've done really well on a course or because something has gone quite badly wrong, and then you've got to get that information out of them. That is a sort of useful skill set for talking to your residents and finding out what is the core of the problem. So I think one of the things we need to remember is that by the time people come to you, they've probably already tried a few more conventional ways of dealing with a problem, and now they're pretty upset. They're beside themselves. They are not maybe as focused as you'd want them to be. So that's a skill set which you get in plenty of other professions as well, teaching, nursing, care workers. It's not unique to the military, but those sorts of skills are really useful. And I think for me, being in local government it's often very frustrating. I live in a place where the Tories have been in power for 25 plus years. It's a pretty stagnant governing group. We didn't quite make the breakthrough this year that we'd hoped to, so that they've clung on to 24 or 48 seats. There's just an inertia there. It's difficult to get things done. That all gets frustrating, but we've all dealt with stuff like that before, if we're honest. And sometimes you get to do some good stuff. I've managed to get through a near miss register. The council now runs one of those, so actually, we've got local residents are able to, well, in fact, not just local residents, anyone who's in the area can report those accidents that almost happened. It's something that we have in the military, something that have a lot of heavy industries, and it will take a while for that to bed in, and we'll see how effective it is, but potentially that could save a couple of lives. We'll never know, but getting something like that through in the face of opposition is really rewarding. That's really good. Got through a motion in council 3-4 weeks ago to protect local sports facilities as well. There's, in the National Planning Policy Framework, there's rules which state that if we develop a sports site, we have to provide equal or better facilities elsewhere. But the first thing I got to do was to actually remind everybody that that's actually in the National Planning Policy Framework, or inform them for the first time. But then got the council to sign up to endeavouring to. Couldn't quite get 100% commitment, but I could get them to sign up to take all reasonable measures to ensure that those facilities were in place before we moved the club. So we potentially say, it sounds a bit, I'm over-egging what I've done, but it potentially saved the target shooting club, and actually it may have some real benefits for some of the other clubs. So actually, it's just that's good. We've done some good stuff for the community, and we've really actually helped make for a better town and borough. So that's rewarding. It's good.
Well, that's amazing. That tangible output of the change that you can affect in your local communities is why I'm such an evangelist for local government, which is why I want members of our community to stand up and serve again. And I don't think it's arrogant at all to say about that duty bound of stepping forward and serving again. In fact, it's something that I want all of us to do, whether that's in local government or volunteering. It's in our DNA of stepping forward and serving. So I think the way in which you've described it is a brilliant case study for anyone listening to the show to then think about, well, how can I make an impact in my community too? But you've already alluded to something there as well, that it can be quite difficult being in opposition, and you try your best campaigning, and absolutely those transferable skills from the military. I've used human terrain analysis in campaigning to get into the weeds of a community and really understand what are the drivers and the people and the atmospherics and everything in a community. But as a Lib Dem, there's just one Liberal Democrat MP with military service, and that's a guest of the show, Jamie Stone. And so what more can the Lib Dems do to engage with the military community to inspire them to stand up and serve again as Liberal Democrats?
Well, we've been more successful, I suspect, than people realise. And I think a lot of that is the legacy of Paddy Ashdown. So at the last election, I believe it was 11 ex-bootnecks who actually stood for election as MP.
Wow! Well, you don't get a better role model than Paddy Ashdown, do you?
Quite. I mean, it's absolutely. I remember him coming into Staff College, and apparently he doesn't particularly like introductions. So one of the Royal Marines got up and said, he doesn't like introductions. So Paddy Ashdown, ex-leader of Lib Dems, ex-bootneck, bit of a legend. That sort of sums it up, really. We've got there's a group we've got going at the moment, which is Lib Dem Friends of the Armed Forces, which we hope to get. I forget the correct term, associated or officiated or whatever it is. Acknowledged as an official Lib Dem group. But I think one of the things to say is that if you are a service person who is liberal or is centrist or who's not happy with the other two parties he wants to serve, the Lib Dems is a welcoming place. There's sometimes that perception that parties that are left of the Conservatives are sort of anti-military, and obviously there's the Shiner was labelled as a liberal by a lot of people, which is galling. But that sort of anti-military streak really isn't there. It's come along. Go to your local party, make contact, go out, knock on some doors, talk to people, get that experience, because actually you will find that it's we are a pragmatic party, and your skills will be valued, and there's plenty of scope to get yourself elected into local government. Obviously, we haven't done quite as well nationally, but we'll have 130 seats next election. We know that for a fact. But there's the opportunities there to make a difference.
It's fantastic to hear about the Lib Dem Friends of the Armed Forces standing up as well, and I look forward to engaging with you on that, because we've seen that in certainly the Labour Friends of the Armed Forces, as well as the Conservatives as well. Those groups are so important within the parties to be able to have that kind of network and that central mass of like-minded people from the armed forces community within those political parties. So that's fantastic development there, James.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's a point Johnny Mercer made when at a meeting we were both at, that the debate when it comes to defence, the debate will not be elevated unless we have veterans on all sides of the house, engaged. It's a sad truth that defence is not a priority for any of the major parties. It's not a vote winner. So if you want to shape policy, if you're worried about the way defence is going, then get involved. You don't even necessarily have to stand for election to do that. If you're part of the party apparatus, you can start feeding ideas and suggestions in, and help do some of the donkey work of trying to get policy written. Even if it's just spell checking it. These things need to happen. So I think there's plenty to do, and obviously Labour and the Conservatives don't work together. It's pretty rare to find them, to working together. I'm sure that in Parliament many of them speak to each other and are mates, but whilst we're unlikely to form a government in our own right anytime soon, we do talk to all sides, and you can have a degree of influence there that maybe more than you expect.
Mega. Well, James, the other thing I was going to ask you about was, you've mentioned about those achievements, what you can achieve locally and what you're trying to achieve within the party too. But I mean, what do you actually hope to achieve with your political career in the long term? When you hang up your clipboard and your rosette, and maybe even your boots as well at the same time from the reserves, looking back, what do you hope to achieve with that service in your community?
I went into it a little bit naive without actually having a particularly clear plan. I delivered leaflets in my hometown of Crowborough, and went to a couple of barbecues and was poked in the chest and said, where do you want to go? And I hadn't actually thought about it much. I've always considered whether it'd be interesting being an MP. Always thought about it, but never really in any depth. Then I moved up, when I got a new job, moved up to Tunbridge Wells, which is only just up the road, and got elected. But what happens as I was going around knocking on doors, I had some core messages that I wanted to push out about what we wanted to do. A lot of it was very local stuff that the majority of listeners won't be interested in, but there were a few things that came back time and time again. One was, why does Tunbridge Wells not have a Waitrose? It's like, that's not really in my power to grant that one. But the other was, I don't think this street is safe for my kids to play on with the way cars come through here. And initially I was like, well, actually, to be honest, that's that's county business. Borough doesn't deal with that sort of stuff. And I thought, actually, this is a big concern. This is a lot of people saying this to me, and it's not it's not people being over dramatic. I've had residents phone me up and break down in tears on the line about the roads outside their houses, and about speeding and about the dangers, particularly to children. And so I went from sort of sidelining that and saying, well, it's not really, that's a county business, it's not really my issue, to thinking this is actually something we need to get fixed, and we do whatever we can do. And that's where the idea for the near miss register came. So I think for me personally, trying to make those residential streets as safe as we can, recognising the restrictions of budgets and the fact that cars have got to go somewhere. I'm not anti-car. That's a big goal. The other one is about a year after I was elected, I was made chair of the local party. So for me, and actually, if you're an ex-staff officer or field grade officer, and you join your local party, wherever it is, I suspect you'll find yourself in an administrative role pretty quickly. So for me, there's a lot of it is getting the local party processes sorted. We spent a long time as a small party. We were punished after the coalition, so we lost members. Now we're building back up. We credibly probably will be running the council in our own right, in the next 2-3 years, and therefore we need to get we need to get beyond the practice of being, as one of my friends says, local politics being something that 12 consenting adults do in private. We need to get the structures, get the formats, and make that an effective force. And that's one thing that I've set myself a goal of the end of next year to really have everything in place. You may not be surprised to note that the local party standing orders are now in JSP 101 format.
There you go, transferable skills left, right and centre of this one. But no, James, it's amazing to be able to sit down with a fellow Tiger, the first of the Veterans in Politics podcast, and also to talk about local government and talk up local government as well, because it's something, it's the most visible and closest part of politics around us. So the more veterans that stand up and serve again, the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
But before we close out, is there anything else any piece of advice that you'd like to give out to someone listening that might think, do you know what, that local government, I might give it a go?
I think wherever you sit on the spectrum, on the political spectrum, join your local party, go out with them, knock on doors, talk to residents, and the issues where you live will not necessarily be the same as the issues where I live. But listen to that and then just think, what can I do about that? If I was a councillor, or even if I wasn't a councillor, what could I do about that? And actually, if you've got a good idea, it probably is quite a good idea, and it's probably worth fighting for.
There we go. Worth fighting for. James, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been absolute hoot chatting, and we'll speak soon. Thank you.
Cheers. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks to our guests, and thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast, hit subscribe now. Alternatively, you can support our mission by checking out in the show notes below, where you can rate, donate, or become our mate. Thank you.